I've been recently told that I should start recording my modeling and hopefully give insight as to my process of my building here. Right now, the first step I'm doing is just bringing up my reference image. In a lot of my builds, people provide me the reference image, which it's not required. I sometimes have fun building my own thing, such as that gear twister that you can see in the background. Not anymore. But sometimes they give me a reference image, and that just simply makes the job a lot easier. So I'm using a plugin called the local import plugin, which allows you to put in images from your computer into Studio without actually uploading to the Roblox server, which is pretty useful. As you can tell here, I'm kind of struggling to get the image onto that base part. It's a glitch that the plugin has had for a while now. You just gotta move it through, just like add it in, just retry it, delete the image again. It'll get there eventually. Just be patient. I don't know why it happens. Roblox is a little finicky like that, but just do it. To continue how my introduction. Other than that, I was told to like record this one just to what kind of insight I can give. I think it's interesting. Before I begin, I think it's interesting how people have been like reacting to my modeling because I don't know. I don't know if it's just me being a little bit humble, but I didn't really consider my builds that special. I do consider it like a little above average. I mean, it's a little it's in the intermediate side. I have to say that, but I wouldn't say it's anything that special. I think like it wouldn't beat anyone who's able to model properly in Blender. That's for sure. But it's all entirely in Studio, and it's like to me like there's not a lot of applications for like games to use my assets because there's like a lot of geometry, a lot of parts. It's not exactly performance efficient, and I feel like I do this simply for like the as a hobby. So I don't really, I can't really justify it being a useful skill to me. So I guess that's the reason why I think like I try to humble myself a little bit. Right here, right now, what I'm doing is I try to make a rough shape of the model. This is you don't need to when you make a rough shape. Oh, I forgot to mention. The reason why I added in a reference image and like start off like in a small scale is that well I want to make sure that the model is properly scaled. So the first thing I always do is use the reference image, put it in make a part, put in the reference image, scale it up appropriately to the model, and then I make a rough shape of it. Now, when you make a rough shape of the model, you don't have to make it too detailed. What you want to try to do is try to like get the most important shape. For example, that rectangular blade. That's a very simple shape. So you might wanna make the rough model to capture that. But the handle, I'm not sure what's with the hilt, is really detailed. So you don't need to at this rate like go incredibly detailed. What you should just do is like try to like match its very angular shape. Try to find like what part may be might be important in the future while you're building this. Right here, I was just going ahead and say, okay, I'm just gonna have to have a blade anyways. So I just add another part. Use the I think it's called the gap fill. Yeah, it's the gap fill plugin. So make it so like it goes narrowed down. And here, another plugin I use is called the class. What was it called? It's the Reclass plugin, which essentially allows you to like change like instances into different types. In this case, I changed a normal base part, the blocky base part, into a wedge part. This is not a normal application of a thing. I think most people uses this so like to change a button UI to like another UI object. But in this case, I just use that as a way to make it easier for me. So like I don't need to like instantiate a new wedge part. I can just like grab a normal base part and just like make it into a wedge part. It's really simple. Um, I'm not. Oh, I'm okay. So again, like in the rough draft, you just try to make the simple shapes. In this case, you try to get in this case, I'm trying to get the parallelogram shape on the side of that weapon there. I mean, right now, when I look at this weapon, I mean, the shape is fairly, like, like, I mean, the thing about making a rough model is, at first, you just need to make it so, like, it looks approximate at a distance. Because what we're doing right now is just get the rough shape, try to get what the important, the contours and like what distinct traits it has. For example, those two parts which are sticking out. I thought that was pretty important, so I just decided to pull them out. And also like the purpose of this rough modeling is you try to let's see I forgot what I was gonna say. Probably cut that out. I had to probably mention that I'm recording this after I did everything. I was thinking of just like recording my audio with the video, but I don't know. I feel like I would get like distracted halfway through, and there would just be like like a bunch of silence going on. I mean, I could cut them out, but I feel like I feel like I don't know. I don't know. It just wouldn't come off naturally. Like I might be doing one thing and I just realized I screwed up, which messes up with my pacing. At least doing this way, there's kind of I have a bit of I know what's going to happen next, so I'm a little bit more prepared. So right now, I just kind of decide to like move the handle. This one's not too interesting. Right now, it's not too interesting. I'm just looking at it right now. Just looking at distance. Yeah, it looks approximate. It looks approximate. I don't know if you notice. Oh, okay. Now we're moving on to the next step. I grouped the entire thing. I duplicated it, and this is kind of the thing that makes my builds. This is steps where I this is the step that I take, which allows me to put in a lot of detail on my builds. And in this step, I essentially group everything together, and then I select the object, I blow it up by a factor of 10. You can see it on the recording, but I had a UI which showed that I blew up by 1,000%, which is blew it up by 10 times its size. And the reason I do this is that I would start small, make the most noticeable details from there, blow it up, and then work on these tinier details while I don't need to sacrifice having to work with like small increments, because I work with increments of 0.1 for movement and 5 degrees for rotation. And the reason why I'm really keen on making sure the increments are like that, make sure the increments are like consistent instead of doing like free increments, which you would think will allow you to do a more detailing. Well, the reason is because like afterwards, I want to make this easier for me to edit, and it's really difficult to edit with models using free increments. And the reason being that if you're working with free increments, like sometimes you have parts which have like different scaling, and like sometimes like the parts, like some parts are like positioned in a weird way, like I don't know, like 0.1006 or something. So when you work with that, everything's gonna look like it's unaligned. So it's a little bit a pain in the ass, and especially since like I want these models to be used so people can go into them and like change it up a bit. I think using increments makes it a lot easier, because it's not absolute chaos. The form and shape of the object is a lot more controlled. One thing I noticed when I was recording is I always estimate my building time around like 2 to 4 hours, and I was about right with this build. But I don't know, I didn't really consider this too difficult. So yeah, it's a pretty standard build time. So this video took around, I think, like 3 hours. I think let me I think when I checked, it was like 3 hours and 27 minutes or something. I don't know. Around 3 to 4 hours, which what I expected. I don't know what people think is a long time to build and how much people think I normally build. But if I think the thing is that with my builds, I just know plenty of techniques enough that it simplifies the whole process. Like I don't really think too much when I build things. At least like as far as like technique goes. Once I mean creative wise, I do have to think a little bit more, but like once I decide how I want something to look, I can like go ahead and build it pretty briskly, you know. Okay, now I'm just like adding in the details of the blade. I mean, in this case, I went with the blade first because it is so simple and it is such a large part of the object. I might as well get it done ahead of time. And not to mention, I felt like the blade was a good place to start with because it's a good place to understand how wide the object will be. Because let's say that because I don't really have a good idea of how thick the handle has to be, how thick the hilt has to be, but I feel like I get a good idea how thick the blade has to be, because the blade you have to cut it down. You have to make it so it looks like it cuts. You can't make it too thick, otherwise it just feels like you're just like slamming something with it. There's no cutting. It's not thin enough that you can't cut a person with it. I think if you make it too thin, it's gonna feel very frail. So you can't have that too. So to me, like the blade is where I start to like make sure the scaling of the object as far as the width goes is properly scaled. Right here, I just add the holes, not too difficult. Yeah, this is the reason why the reference image help. I know the positioning of these objects. I can just like physically move everything into the image and get a more precise scaling and positioning. All right. Yeah. So yes, I do use unions, but a lot of times, like some tasks are sort of just easier without using unions. I think the most difficult thing of using unions is you have to sometimes try to use negative space, which is extremely difficult. But you have to sometimes do it if the geometry is too complicated that you can't do it by hand. I think it usually happens when a surface is like extremely sharp or convex. It's just simply easier to just like carve out a shape. All right. Um, one thing I note about as far as culling of the model goes is that, and this is something I noticed, but if your models will look better if you fake the shading on the objects. It's not a big deal on this weapon. The only time I've done this is like within those holes, where I used a darker gray there to emphasize that the depth of the hole and how light would likely not get into it as easier as the surface of the sword. But sometimes when I do buildings, I always have the buildings have like one side of the building have a slightly different color, like a part with a different color completely on one side, and it really does emphasize the dimension of the model of the whole building. Because when both sides are the same, I mean, sometimes like the lighting is so subtle that you don't really see the difference of you don't really feel like the light hitting like the different surfaces like perpendicular to each other, like the color aren't different at all. So sometimes you have to manually change it, and it gives it an extra more dimension without like finagling with like global lighting, which is really exhaustive because sometimes like some settings on lighting don't look right on certain angles of the build. Sometimes they are. So if you want to improve your build as far as coloring goes, you might want to fake shading a little bit more. Okay. this is getting a little bit boring. So what I might do is if I don't have anything to say about what's going on screen, I would just like speed this up a little bit and then just like move it to normal speed when I'm ready. Right now I'm just doing the handle. So I'm gonna skip a little bit and see you there. Well, here's another technique for the day. Let's say that you want to get a oval-like shape in your build. One thing to do this is either use a mesh cylinder or you union the whole thing so you can change this proportionality. Before, and this is a new update, which thank God, like once in a while, a good Roblox update. In the past, there was something called form factor, where unlike a sphere where you can like stretch all the sides of the axes and you can like actually stretch the sphere to different ways. A cylinder will always have its face side, the circular face side never change because of its form factor. Now that changed, which is great. That's great to hear. One thing I also want to mention about cylinders is that you may notice that the face sides of the cylinders are on this x-axis. In contrast to a year ago, in the past, the face sides were always on the y-axis. At first, when this changed, I was a bit annoyed because I was so used to it. But now it sort of makes sense, and it sort of makes sense, and I think it's actually more useful if it's on the x-axis, because my other technique, which I'm going to talk about later, it kind of revolves around this. It has to do with the reference image and being able to adjust the width of the object very quickly. And I had a break during the recording of this session in this time lapse. The entire thing, the entire recording it was 3 hours long. I'm not so sure how it was total if I count also the times where I just like stopped midway. I think if I included those breaks, it would take a lot more time. I think it's like double the time because in the middle of it, I had like a lunch and dinner. So who knows? Regardless, it seems like when people ask a request, they are usually surprised when I get back to them within the day. So it doesn't seem to be a huge problem. I think most people would kind of expect something to come back in a week or something. But no, usually I can get it done in a day. Personally, I feel like in my mind it has to be finished within a day. Otherwise, I just kind of lose interest in it and just give up halfway through. I don't know why. I think it's mostly because I always build in the moment, and once I'm in the zone, once I'm in the zone, I can keep going. But once I get out of the zone, it's just I just don't. All the energy I had was completely dissipated. Still, I'm doing all this in a single day. I feel a little bit proud about doing it. One of the problems I had with this build is, believe it or not, it doesn't have to do with the shape of the build, how complex the detailing is. It's the reference image and not understanding what's going on in this blurry thing, because at the handles it is so difficult to tell the depth and the dimension of this image. Sure, you can get the general shape of it from one side, but you don't know if one part is narrower than the other one, if one side is curved or not, because at this scale, the image is so compressed that you can't tell the shading, and everything is blurred out, that even you can't really get a good silhouette of the shape. And this is especially true at the handles and the hilt. Luckily, the blade is very simple in shape and detailing, so that wasn't a big problem. But the handle and the hilt was by far the most difficult part of this build. if you paid attention to that real quick time lapse, I was just like finicking around, not building anything. And the reason is that I was looking at the hilt, and I just looked at it and just realized I think the hilt is a little bit too thick on the top side. And the reason I realized that is because I made the blade a little bit too thick. So right now I'm just adjusting it, so I'm thinning it around, thinning the blade around, which I thought, if I thin the blade around, I am able to thin the hilt around so it feels a little bit more natural. That's what I was doing right there. Probably the most tedious part of modeling is like you realize you made a mistake and you just sort of have to rebuild something. Well, not rebuild, just sort of have to like move around things a bit. Right now, I'm just looking at the old thicker blade and the new thinner blade, and I was just saying, like, compared to the scaling of the character, which like it was a thick blade, like perfectly fine, or was a thinner blade, like better. In this case, I went with the thinner blade mostly because like its sharpness is a little bit more pronounced. The thicker one looks a little bit too round, and I didn't want to make it like jut out a little bit, like bigger, just to make it sharper. So I just went with the thinner blade in the end. But just in case I want to go back, I just kept the thicker blade on the side there. And then I just go back to like going in the hilt, and now I can like thin down the hilt so it looks a little bit more how I imagined the blade would be. I think it's a little weird to have the hilt wide like that. It kind of looks like there's like an engine inside of it or something like very like hefty inside of it, which doesn't feel like something like you can swing around like a sword. It feels like it's like really heavy on like something that's immediately above your fist, rather than like it's heaviest at the blade, which it should be. So I tried to like thin down that hilt just so it emphasizes the scale of the blade a lot better. Okay, good. So this is one of the easiest techniques that you can pull off when you want to improve your build, and that is simply give your build a bevel. And what I mean bevel is like give like round up the corners some way. I don't know why that like significantly improves the model, like how it looks, but I think it just has to do with the fact that a lot of objects naturally do not have sharp corners. I mean, if you look at the table, like you're setting in front of, if you notice, like the corners of the table are a little bit rounded out. So like some taller can't ram in its forehead, so it's like caves its head in, but the sharp corners, to prevent that. But not only that, but I feel like aesthetically, it's just soothing to have a rounded off corner because nature has a lot of rough shapes, a lot of sharp edges, and human design would try to accommodate for a little bit more safer, smoother geometry. And in this case, there's two ways of adding bevels. In the one I'm showing here right now, what I'm doing is I'm just like estimating. I just like kind of duplicate the shape and just move around the shape a little bit and just like estimate the parse, the beveling, so like how it just like sticks out a bit. This is a little faster. This technique is a little bit faster as far as like beveling goes. You just have to like duplicate something, like adjust it a bit, adjust the position a bit, which isn't too difficult, and then you just use a gap fill plugin to like connect the edges together. The only cost of this is it's technically not too accurate because like you're just kind of guessing the width. And if you're working with like really rough increments like I do, like sometimes like some parts of the bevels like kind of looks like it's sticking out more than the other. So it depends on like whether or not you care about that detail. If you want to save time, you go with like this method, which is duplicating the shape and just like kind of moving the parts out and then just like connecting the edges together. In this build, I happen to do both techniques. Well, the first technique is this one, which is it's less accurate, but it's more time saving, and the other one is it's a little bit more like time consuming, but it's significantly more accurate. One bad thing about this technique is that if you estimate the build, like what's happening here, sometimes the plugin for gap fill just doesn't work. So you have to like rethink how it's done and just make sure like just like do it in some other way. So like you connect different edges and then you connect another edge, and sometimes like the plugin can't figure out what to do. And then after all that's done, you just have to group all the bevels that you made, group them together, and you use the mirror plugin, and just do it for the other side. There, you have the job. You have the effort that you need to put in the job real quickly, and you made the object have a bevel. My personal theory as to why the bevel looks good, other than like it looks more natural, is just that it gives an object a little bit more dimension because if everything's like a perpendicular to the other, like everything looks orthogonal, it just looks significantly more flat because like naturally, if you have just like two like perpendicular edges like crossing each other, you're just gonna get like at most like two different kinds of color depending on how the light reflects off of them. But if you just add bevel, that just adds another layer to it. I don't know. That's my theory, anyways. Um, because if you just have like two flat edges crossing each other, just get like two like it looks like two rectangles or like two like really distinct boundaries. When you smooth out that boundary, I think it just naturally looks better. Now I'm just working on the other part which I noticed in the build. Just repeating the same process, just like carve out the shape. Except this time I'm gonna give it a bevel, but I'm using the slow but accurate method of creating bevels. So right here, I duplicated one of the base parts, and I just made it so like keep duplicating a plate of it, so it's aligned to the surface of the part. And as you can tell, like this is a little like time, like it takes a little bit of time because like you have to physically move around this plate, just make sure like it's centered. I mean, right now I'm just struggling to place this plate like properly oriented on that surface. It's a bit of a pain. And then after that, I mean, I'm not done with that one because I then have to like make sure like every single one of those plates covering the shape is like a resized properly. Again, right here, I'm struggling to like orient it because for some reason, like Control R and Control L are not behaving properly, and it's not giving me the right results. All right, so I think that is the last plate I done, and right here, I'm just making sure the shape is like it still looks good. I think the problem with like doing beveling is that like, it kind of puffs up the shape of the object because you're just slightly making it larger so you can have that beveling shape. And now I have to resize everything so the plates all connect to each other. Oh, this is gonna take a little bit more time. Meanwhile, to fill in the time, I guess I want to discuss something that's been bothering me a bit. When people ask, and when people say like comments on my builds, they say like, "Oh, you're so talented." I think like normally, I think if you're above average something, a lot of people would think that it comes to talent, which I don't believe. Because to me, I only recently started. I feel like I only recently started to like build on this level, and it started like during 2020 when I just basically had like a bunch of free time, and I just wasted my time doing builds like this to like random people on my server. You can join the Discord server. It should be in the link in the description. Anyways, uh, and I've been on this website for like ever since like 2012. I think I was like 12 at the time, and and then by then I was not a good builder, and even between like from 2012 to 2020, I don't think I was really into building. So whatever, and I think I got pretty okay at building during that time and now. So I don't believe it was ever talent. I think it's just like I just had like I just had a lot of like time that I could invest into doing something, which I could do that. So I don't really believe that this is something that requires talent. I think it just requires like some knowledge. But on the other hand, like I think one of the things that really discouraged me into like ever getting like talented in any kind of art is that like people, one of the most often said suggestion or advice is practice. You should always practice what you can. That's when you get good. Practice makes good, right? To me, that is by far one of the worst advice you could give to someone, especially for someone who very much values technical skill like me. I don't really consider like I don't think I got better at coding because of practice. There's a little bit more to that. Like I didn't wake up like as a morning routine. I just have some like coding exercise. That's not what I did. Um, what I essentially done was what I essentially did was I just like had the motivation at the time to do something and to like put in like a lot of effort to do something. That's what happened. That's what it is. I think when you want to learn something, you need to have the motivation to do it. You need to have the persistence to keep doing it. And then like I think the last element is like being resilient to like failure. But like you're starting out. You're not gonna be good at the start, right? And in my opinion, I admire people who sucks at something, but they keep going on. They just keep pushing what they need to do, and I find that really admirable because those people, I believe, are gonna go pretty far in life. Right now, I'm now finally putting on the beveling, so as a result, you can see why you can see like it drastically improves this like very abstract shape. Anyways, this idea that you need practice is such an unhelpful thing because it's so vague. But I do know what they mean. They mean like, oh, I mean, it just takes time. You just gotta be patient, which is true. You need to be patient to learn any kind of skill. My problem with like saying practice is that like it's like as a new person, you're gonna misinterpret what they mean by practice. And when I heard like, oh, you just gotta practice, like, okay, I guess I should have like especially like when I was trying to get into like drawing, which I'm no good at right even now. Like what I thought was okay, so I guess I should like buy like a canvas and like those stencil things and like just uh find any reason to write and draw. And as a result, nothing came from it because like I just pretty much forced myself to do something, which is not good. And that's the important thing is motivation. If you have motivation, the world's your oyster. If you have, and it has to be, in my opinion, this motivation, and this is kind of a little bit sardonic, but I think this motivation has to be something that is a little bit selfish, a little bit like grounded in reality, and not something like passion. Like you should not go into a project, start a project just because like this idea that you had like was so amazing. As an amateur, I think you should go into doing projects. The most successful projects that you'll have are ones which are like you have like personal stakes in, or like you have like a personal benefits from. For example, when I did coding, the only reason when I started coding, I wanted to do it because I wanted to make these really cool games, but nothing ever came from it because I just didn't that motivation. Like even if I had a really cool idea, that motivation would dry up so quick as soon as I found like my first obstacle. And I was like, oh man, like hard work. This isn't what I want to get in for. Man, it's kind of, but I started to really get into coding when I said, oh my god, this task while building this task I have is so it is so tedious. Is there a way to simplify this? And then like I figured out, oh, there is a way to make this the less tedious. And then I just built the code, right? I built the code to build whatever coder algorithm that to that made this job a lot easier. That's how I did my rig utilities plugin. That's how I made the updated version of the resize plugin that I'm using in this build. And to me, my philosophy is that I think it's admirable to have passion, but for some people, you can't. When you're running on passion, you're running on fumes, and it's not really a reliable source of motivation. Meanwhile, some people are very technical, and they would rather have a little bit more grounded sense of motivation. We're very simple. If I do this, my life will be a lot more easier later on. I think that's a very realistic thing for motivation. And even money is a good motivation, even though it's a little bit, it's kind of, how do I say, cynical if your motivation is entirely monetary based. But whatever gets you. But in my experience as a starter, do not do something because you are passionate for it. You don't know anything at the time, and you might not be the kind of person who really does excel through once you're extremely passionate at something, which in my case it was not. It may be for you, maybe being passionate is what gets you, but a lot of cases I think people who are very very passionate, that does not translate to them completing the project. So man, my personal advice is if you want to do something as a motivation, don't go for don't say I have a dream or I have a vision. I think you should go for a little bit more realistic. Say, if I do this thing, it's gonna benefit me in the long term. And that's my problem with saying practice, because it seems like just doing it benefits you. I don't think just doing it benefits you. I think you need to do it because you need to do it in the effort that it benefits you. It definitely benefits you in the end. In my case, I started to do coding because I did it so I could do more beneficial things for me in the end. I didn't code because I assumed just the act of coding would benefit me. No, there's an end result that I want to get to, which is which I want to get, which kind of gets me going. Also, I think a lot of people just hate doing tedious things. So one of the things that you could do easily is just as a motivation, is just pushing yourself to be lazy. You invest effort just so you can be less effortful in the near future. I think that's a funny way of saying it. I think the other aspect of it is that you need to have persistence, and obviously you need to have persistence, otherwise you're going to be giving up on a project really quickly. And if you have a technical reason of doing this, I think your persistence will get stretched out a lot longer. But I think persistence is a very, very that's a very admirable quality. It's something I kind of lack as well. I think one of the reasons, I think a way to help out with persistence is just making sure whatever you're doing eventually pays out in the end. And one of the ways you can do this is essentially finding an audience who will enjoy the product that you make. It doesn't have to be monetary. This can just be that you share your stuff to people and they say, oh, they genuinely enjoy it, right? Like find people, like you need to find a group of people who will you can appreciate when they compliment you. And don't go for people who just like compliment you just because you put effort into something. No, get some people who are likely going to be just a bunch of strangers and try to see if you can get try to like see if they you can get some good impression from them. I think that's a reason why I value the opinion of strangers over people I already know, because people who already know, I feel like they're not going to be they're going to be a little more nicer to me. They care about my feelings. I think if for strangers, like they have less inclination to be nice. So when they say nice things and they don't know me at all, I feel like it comes from a little bit more of a genuine place. I don't know. That's my personal experience. I think a part of why I do this is basically because I have an audience, and it's a bit of an ego thing. Like when people compliment my builds, I feel like my ego is a bit inflated and makes me feel better about myself. Which I know people will probably look at that and say, "Oh, that's not really a good reason to do something." But I don't know. I think in the end, people are just generally selfish, and people are more motivated not by like being virtuous and not by being charitable, but by being kind of spiteful, or sometimes just like going with their own just being having like selfish goals. I mean, that's a very pessimistic view of humanity, but to me, I'm just saying, I think to me, it just feels like humans are a lot more simple than we make it out to be. You know, and that's I think that's a little better than just going on a quote unquote passion. I think if you're doing this just to feel good and just to get praise, good enough, good enough. That's good on you. If that's the thing that gets you going. And the last thing I think trait of I think the final trait that you need to establish before you get good at something is just not only persistence, not only motivation, but resilience. People, at the start, people are gonna be shitting on you, and you're probably gonna look down on in your past of you doing cringy your past cringy works, but I think that's just naturally something you have to do before you get better. Um, I don't think some people are just naturally talented and they don't have to go through the process, but people who aren't, but it eventually goes past the process, goes past the phase of being ridiculed, is I think it's admirable. Like so many there's people might consider it consider you like a dumbass because you keep doing things and your end product is just terrible. But those people who just constantly just keeps going on and on and on and on, I don't know. I think that's incredibly admirable. Especially on the internet. I watched these amateurish YouTube videos, no budget at all. They just picked up their dad's camcorder and just recorded themselves all across their neighborhood. And obviously, that kind of quality of video is not up to snuff, and up to snuff in modern standards. And but there's a charm to it because this guy just went up and didn't care if the product was gonna be shit and just made it anyways. That's not something you see from very high budget Hollywood productions. Having a bad project probably is gonna having a terrible failure of a project probably is gonna hit a person's hits their their self-confidence a lot. I watched a movie called Ed Wood, which is I forgot the director of the he made I think he made yeah it's a story about a director that is world renowned for being the absolute worst director of all time. But it's a historical fiction and depicts the director as this very chipper, aloof but passionate guy. He clearly loves filmmaking, but he's just technically Um, he's just technically like under underwhelming. Like his sets are very terrible. He hires actors who should not be otherwise acting, and then like his direction is so like haphazard. Like he just only takes one take. But I think the movie really portrays this guy as a hero because he's very resilient. He keeps going on. His like reaction to failure. He doesn't treat like his terrible movies as failure. And he goes on to like all these like he goes on to like so many lengths to fund his films, and like like meets a lot of people. I mean, at some point he meets like a spoiler alert Orson Welles, which never happened in reality, but it's a good scene in the movie. And I think like people with that kind of resilience, like that's the kind of experience life gives when you're that resilient. You're that resilient to like when you're like this shameless about like how bad you are. I think you just naturally have a more like exciting life. I guess that's a reason why. I mean, like, I do have I have a cringy past as far as like my artistic abilities go because I was, as a kid, I was fucking absolutely delusional as my artistic skills. But as much as I look down on that at times, I feel like you really have to appreciate that resilience that you had in the past probably led you to being a better creator at this point. Um, I guess that's a reason why, like, I don't mind, like, kind of like a breaking balls with people. Because in the end, I don't think, I make, I feel like I owe people my honesty. It's like how I feel about it. Otherwise, they're not going to know how far they have gone in the future. If I make fun of them now, I feel like they need to build up some kind of resilience to ridicule. That's just naturally what happens to a lot of creators in my eyes. Um, and it's tough. It sometimes hurts, but just I don't know. I think those other people who like ridiculed me in the past, I owe them something. As much as like I hated how they criticized me back then, looking back at it, I mean, sometimes they had a point, sometimes they didn't, but like they were probably like a smaller dosage of the kind of like hurtfulness that you're gonna feel later on in the future, even outside of like creative efforts. Like it's you just need to face the pain, just keep going on. That's how you gotta do. I think this extends up to like relationships with anyone else. Like you sometimes you got to go through a process of like getting your feelings hurt, just so you can get better later on. I think the only time like getting hurt doesn't pay off is like straight up. It just like stops you from doing any more creation, which I think at that point it's your responsibility to just stop interacting, take a break, and just like try to see in the immediate future if you have the motivation to keep going on. But still, I think you need to have the mindset of just like facing these moments of ridicule a little bit more graciously, or just outright ignore him if it really does get to you. Because I think a sign of like maturing as a creator is just like recognizing that the troubles in your past was like feel so minuscule looking back at it. That's when you made it, I suppose. I still haven't made it, but I don't think I made it. I don't think I'm exceptional at all. But I think I got a bit of a taste as to feeling the result of why having such resilience paid off in the end. Okay, so this is a bit of an interesting technique that I made up during this build. At this point, the reference images compression has been just like been such a problem to me. And one of the problem is that like, okay, I'm trying to trace the shape of the object here, but the problem is like when you're putting the parts over the object, it just blocks the view of the image. So at this point, what I did is I just like changed the material to force field. So that way, like not only are you able to see through and see the image, see through the parts and see through the image, you can like see like where the parts like intersect with the image. Right now, I'm just doing a little experimentation. Like maybe I should like reducing the transparency and see what happens. But the point being that you notice how like with force field, like where it intersects, you can see like a really clear rectangle. That like makes it for like a really good like a guide to see if like your part is like if your build is like properly aligning. I guess I should mention this now since I think I missed the opportunity to talk this like technique previously. But and this is a weird technique to mention. But when you are using a reference image, make sure that all your parts are like the axis that is perpendicular to is the x-axis. And it's not really obvious why it has to be an x-axis, but it's going to be a lifesaver later on because one of the problems that you're going to face while building is that at a certain point you have this like rough outline of a shape and then you want to change the thickness of the shape, so it might be like a thinner or thicker. But the problem is if you select every single part that you use, you notice that some of the parts are misaligned so that like you can't just like change like the x size of every part and it will adjust. Sometimes like some are like oriented so like it's pointing y-wards or like it's oriented so like the z side is perpendicular to the reference image. So you had to like manually go through every one of them and like resize it like one by one. If they're and sometimes like you don't even notice like some parts are like rotated in a weird way that you don't notice that like when you moved it around it created these like gaps or like it made it like stick out from the parts unless it's like too late. The way to overcome this is just keeping in mind to keep the one of the axes like making sure that the axis that's perpendicular to the image is all the same. And the axis that the axes for every part that you need to like make perpendicular is by far the x-axis, not the y-axis, not the z-axis, the x-axis, and it has to be x-axis because a lot of the parts in Roblox they're aligned so that the x-axis is the flat side. It's the flat. Both sides are flat on the x-axis. If you open up Studio and you create a cylinder, you're gonna notice that the cylinder is like oriented so that the circular face is at the x-axis, right? And the same goes for the wedge part because the side which has the triangular faces are also oriented at the x-axis. This essentially means that like okay, if you want to make if you want to make a shape and like carve out a shape on a flat plane, you can take advantage of the circular shape and the triangular shape. And then later on, if you want to readjust the width of the object, all you have to do is like select everything and just change the x-axis in the properties tab. And then instantly you can just like adjust just how thick and thin that you want it. It's just a very minor like a time saving measure, but it's like a major problem to people who are new to building because like they made this like very complex 2D shape. They want to give it a bit more dimension or like give it like make it a little bit thicker, but when they do that like their shape is completely messed up. So this is as one of my advice. Make sure you have, if you're working with a reference image, make sure that the axes that that's perpendicular to the reference image is the x-axis. No other axis is as important as the x-axis. And that's the reason why, like, my opinion when the face of the cylinder and the cylinder mesh went from being oriented from the y-axis to the x-axis. Why my opinion like changed to be a lot more positive, because this is a very, very useful feature which people don't really discuss a lot about. One thing that I didn't mention why I have this technique where I, make a small build, small rough model, blow it up, and then later on like shrink it down, is because well, not only do you have the benefit of precision because you're working on a larger model, there's also a thing where like if you like blow something up and make something smaller, a lot of your mistakes are like imperceptible at that scale. Right here, I think I noticed that like I used to gap fill, and like I think one of the sides just kind of looked like it's sticking out, and you can't, yeah. So like you see those like little nubs at the corners. Now at the large scale, those are a little bit distracting, but in the small scale, those are practically like imperceptible. Because like you just like eventually in the end, those things are gonna get smaller by a factor of 10 anyways. And that's the benefit of like blowing out the model and shrinking it down. It really like not only are you able to like emphasize the detail, it also like de-emphasizes the mistakes that you made. So if you're using this technique, like one way to optimize it is just simply make it so like you just don't fix these kinds of mistakes. Like if a part sticks out a little bit, who cares? Who cares? Like you're like the player's never gonna see that. You can just ignore it. So take advantage of that. Again, I had a problem with the reference image. I try to find a different. I mean, if you see any moment where there's like long periods of me not like doing anything on screen, that's probably because I'm just trying to find a good reference image and try to figure out what exactly is going on the texture of this object. Because the texture image I was provided, the reference image I was provided, is just so blurry, and it just doesn't get any better than what you're seeing right now. So you have to have a bit of artistic license to like discern what exactly is going on. Like, are these supposed to be two different parts? Are these supposed to be connected to each other? Is this supposed to be like smooth? Is this supposed to be beveled? Is this supposed to be sharp? You don't know, because I can't find a single official art of this model. And I gotta mention, this is some sword from the game Neir Automata. I have not played the game before, so I'm even less familiar with this model. But no, every other image is like a mock-up, a recreation, a 3D model that's a recreation. But even then, like it's positioned at a weird angle, so like you don't see all the details. And these mock-ups are like simplify the models like very significantly. Again, the biggest problem, the most difficult part of the build is not necessarily like the shape or the detail. It was just working with the reference image, because you really gotta like use your imagination to figure out what exactly is going on. I mean, it's such a odd shape. Like it doesn't look very practical. Like it's such a complex geometry. It's not smooth or anything. It's pretty blocky. It's just that you're not really sure what each part does. Like, why is there a pipe, like a silver pipe going through the middle of it? And I couldn't tell if the thing on the side was also a pipe or some exhaust port. And I didn't understand why a sword would have an exhaust port. I don't know. Some sci-fi technology. Yoko Taro probably figures something in his genius mind of his. It gets a noggin jogging is what I'm saying. All right, so as you can tell, I'm kind of comparing the build is like, close to being done, so I'm just like putting it side to side and seeing everything aligns. The shape and scaling of each component is slightly different. Some like I think some parts are a little smaller than the one in the image, and I had to like move around the some models around just to make it a little bit more natural. Because if I just left it in the correct position, it looks like there's a bit of a gap. So at this point, I mean, I'm not gonna fix it by like changing the scaling, like painstakingly changes the scaling. I'm just gonna move it around just so it looks natural. I mean, it's easily. I mean, at this point, yeah, you want to try to make it accurate, but you also have to like balance it out by having it actually look good. So I try to compress the things out, and that means like moving some parts upwards close together, and try to fill in a little bit more detail. And after this point, I have to work on the what looks like pipes around the images, and doing some minor adjustments. So it looks a little bit better. Minor adjustments that really does not contribute to the overall look of the part. But one thing I dread about making these models is, first of all, it's twofold, and therefore two completely opposite reasons. One is that like if I'm not given enough freedom, it's just not fun. You're just going through the motions, and it's not too interesting. You're not really giving your personal flair. It's a little boring. On the other hand, and the irony is that this is the complete opposite option. If I'm given a request and like they're not giving me anything to work with, I find that like significantly more difficult. If I was given like an instruction, that's actually easier, but it's just not fun. If I'm given like no instructions, just tell me to like say, oh, do whatever. Like I trust you can do this. That is like incredibly difficult for me because I trust on the person who's requesting it to know what they want. Having that kind of and I watched a video. I forgot what it was called. I think it was like Nerd City or something, where he did a survey. He was talking to a bunch of people, asking commissions from people, and one of the best commissions they heard were something that is very specific because, and that really did open my eyes a little. And like my experience with like doing these free requests, I kind of understand now because you think as artists, like you don't want to pressure them, you don't want to you don't want to be too strict on them, you don't want to restrict their freedom. But in reality, some people just they do better under like a lot of doing under a lot of people work a lot better when they're given a rubric. I think I'm more of a person who works better on the rubric, but I don't know. I think a part of it is like I also want to have fun with this because I'm doing this for free. If I'm getting paid for this, like I would probably I'll just shut up and just build. But if I'm doing this for free, I also want to have fun with it. I don't want this to be too much of a chore. But in this case, it's a weird medium, and ironically enough, the fact that the reference image was so blurry has contributed to that because I was able to add in these like minor details, which I thought made the build look a little better. It's a little bit more fun because I let creativity work. Now, obviously, if I was not given like this reference image at all, I would like absolutely hate doing this task because I would not understand what exactly they're asking at all. Sometimes people give me too much reference images, and I don't know what I'm supposed to get from any of them. And often I just ask the person who's requesting them, what exactly do you want from these images? Because these are two different like swords. I don't know if you want to have it look more demonic or looking a little bit more like normal. As a person who is the person who like listens to requests, I think the best thing you can do as a person requesting them is just being very specific, but don't get too upset if it mildly veers away from it. To me, I like builds which are not complicated geometrically. It's just complicated in terms of like mechanically how it looks. Like I'm a person who likes doing these sci-fi builds which look a little blocky. Not these builds which will look very naturalistic and like or naturalistic or very rigid. Those are like very extreme things, but I like builds which has a lot of obtuse or right angles, not a lot of acute angles or what lot where like it's just like a bunch of curves. Those are where that's where I feel like I excel at. Not that I can't do them. It's just that like it's just a pain in the ass to build like a bunch of curves. I know a lot of people like can't handle curves, but stylistically for me, I'm a more blocky kind of guy because I joined in I think around like 2012. The aesthetics was everything looked like Legos at that time, so I'm very nostalgic at that of that era of Roblox. Okay, finally, for the moment of truth, I grouped everything together, and now I just gotta, shrink it down and see how it looks in a smaller scale. In my opinion, looking at like at this like blown up scale, it looks pretty like underwhelming. Oh, before I do that, one of the things I do is I try to weld it properly. I use a tool called Reg Utilities. I coded myself. What I just did is clicked on the multi-weld button, which will like if you select a model, it will like create it'll weld the entire thing, but it'll also create a part inside of the model, which will like which is like a based on the boundary box of the model, and later on you can resize it like I previously just did, and you can just like and you just click on the button that says fix model weld, and it'll just like re-add those welds onto the model again. Now it's been resized and it looks all right. In my opinion, the benefit of doing this like blowing it up and sizing it down thing is that like at a large scale, like models don't really the model doesn't really look that impressive. At a smaller scale, it looks a lot more impressive because it makes people think that, oh wait, did this guy really add in this many detail at this small of a scale? Which isn't true. I used a very large model and just like added the details from there, which makes the entire thing easy. And then in the process here is I have to create a demo image for the person who requested it to get approval from them. In this case, I just made it black, so there's no shadows, and made it flat, made it like smooth because you don't want smooth. Sometimes what I would do is use a force field and change the transparency like this to a negative value. But as you can see, like the texture, the transparent texture, and the background kind of seeps in, so it's not really a good option. So in that case, you just sort of have to use the smooth mesh thing. If you do want to get a really clean color, use the force field and change the transparency to a negative color. All right, and oh wait, I think I need to change the point. Did I do it? Oh yeah, I got to change the lighting, so like the dimension, like depending on the lighting, the object will seem a little flat. If you like put it in a place where like you get to see the shadows, or at least like different normals look like very drastically different. Like it'll make the object look like it has a lot more dimensions, and that's the power of just like adding in shading to an image. Anyways. Okay, now what I'm going to do is this is not something that was requested by the person who asked for this model, but I asked them, okay, do you want any like personalized alternate colors to this thing? So when I asked them, they told me, okay, they gave me something like a middle gray, black, and gold. And then I opened up the Recolor plugin, which is probably one of my favorite plugins in Studio, mainly because how simple it is and how quickly you can create a different color variation just by selecting a model quickly. But before I had to do that, because this model has unions and the use part color property is it's not set to true by default, I had to do I have to run a code inside the command line. I think it's called a command line, uh, and then just like run this thing, and it'll just like set any unions that is descendant of my selection to have its use part color true. That's just a way to like save a lot of time. Considering how complicated the model is, in some cases, since people use a lot of unions, this might be like a very useful time saving measure. And okay, so now I selected that, I run it, and now it's ready to go. To achieve this alternate coloring, what I did was just reduce the saturation a little. It didn't seem like. Give me a second. It seems like I didn't run the code yet. There we go. You have to remember it's not union; it's union operations. It's a bit confusing. Run that for both both models, and let's see how well this goes. Man, I'm feeling really impatient about how slow I am, even though this is me we're talking about. Okay, reduce the saturation a little. Don't screw around to go higher, and then change the luminance, which is the overall brightness of the object, and it gives this like very like stark contrast, a bit of edgy looking coloring to this thing. I mess around the hue, so those yellow strips there becomes like the same blue as the logo of the shirt that he's wearing. After this, I believe what happened is, yeah, I think I'm about done here. I think the only thing I have to do as far as like coloring manually is like changing some parts to gold. Now, after I used the recolor plugin to like change the overall tone of the object, I had to like selectively manually change some parts on it. In this case, I try to make I don't know what the term is called. It's like the inner part, where inner background accent. I don't know, and give it like a gold accent. And and immediately, like I love how it looked. I mean, it looked like some sort of like a cheetah pattern. I don't know what it is, like a panther. It's really distinct to me. This color gold is like it's not like it doesn't scream at you, and it's a little bit more mellow, but it's a little classy as well. I don't know. I don't know if anything that I'm saying means anything, but I just really like this accent gold color. Yeah. And then I just did the same for like the all the small metallic parts, just to make it so like it makes like a I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Again, it's like it's supposed to be accent color. I think I think one of the problems I have is that like when you have a model, it's just kind of difficult to select things when everything's so clumped up together like this. There used to be I know there was a plugin which allows you to select things better. It did not turn out well for me. It was kind of really finicky, and it doesn't allow you to like select by descendants. It only allows you to select like children, which I thought wasn't really that useful because a lot of my stuff there's just like a very complex hierarchy in my models, and I don't want to like go through a process of like ungrouping everything just so it can work with this plugin. Either way, I just completed the coloring and oh, I believe I changed it slightly a bit. Yeah, that looks a little better. That pipe part it shouldn't blend in with the rest of the model, which is good, which is very good. All right, I think coloring is done. I think after this, I just have to deliver the thing to the person who requested it, and that requires me to post a model and then do whatever else. Okay, now this is my. I guess I can consider this a bit of my trademark because every time I upload these free model for everyone, I always add in this character model of the requester holding onto the weapons. Um, the reason why I always do this, is because I always want these models to feel a little bit more personalized to the person who requested it, because this whole thing of doing free model requests started at when I on the server just decided, you know what, I want to do this animation where like a bunch of people on the server's character models are fighting each other, and I said, hey, what kind of weapon do you guys want to use to like fight each other? Um, and I offer this service for free, and if people will answer, I just like build it for them, and to make it a little bit cooler and try to like give and try to make the weapon feel like more lived in, or like it looks like it was used by the person who used that. I just kind of have the model be posed with the character model, which is why I do it for every single one of them. And first of all, not only do I have like the image of the weapon itself to show, like I can show like someone holding on to it as like as a demonstration of, and I guess like it gives the weapon a little bit more character. This time the posing was a little bit difficult, and I wasn't really sure. Like I'm a little iffy with the actual pose I went with. I think a part of me was like was kind of like a struggling because I was trying to make a slashing motion, but if you do a slashing motion, like you need to have a full body, and then like the focus like gets taken away from the sword. What I mean by that is like when you do a slashing motion, like it's difficult to have it so the camera is pointed like to show like the body like stretching out when it's slashing something, but also like keeping the sword in focus, because usually the sword would be like a little bit like covering a tiny part of the screen, which kind of makes the like a have showcasing the weapon a little pointless, because I mean these images are supposed to showcase the weapons, not just the person using them, first and foremost. So I need to compromise between making this weapon look like it's characteristic, like making it look like that the person holding this weapon is like it's in character, but also making the weapon be the focus. This character model didn't really help. Like, I don't know, he kind of looks like some, like a really generic like anime avatar thing, no, like a generic anime protagonist. So it was a little difficult trying to discern what kind of personality I can like exude from this guy. And as you tell, I have this like downward like resting position of the knife, but like I couldn't really figure out what's the best camera position. Should I go like down low, or like from above, from the side? So I just kind of gave up. In the end, I think I chose the like a less exciting looking pose. He was just like staring at the blade. Not really. I guess it looks like he's contemplating on it, but I don't know. It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite pose from out of these. I feel like I've done more dynamic poses here. I mean, after you do like 20 of these like sword requests, like it's really difficult to make every sword feel like they're unique, like with the user that they're with the person that they're holding on to, they're held with. I don't know. Yeah, I hope you can tell, like, talking alone by myself for an hour is a little awkward. I keep starting over myself. Oh man, this pose is a little awkward. He has the sword like backwards, held backwards, like Ahsoka Tano holding a lightsaber, which looks kind of cool when I was a kid, but right now it doesn't really make sense for a sword like this. That's gotta feel really uncomfortable because of how the weight is displaced. I don't know what I was trying to do with this one. It doesn't really look that intimidating either. I guess it doesn't help that like usually with people who request like swords with this kind of avatar, usually just like requesting like katanas or like really tiny swords. And this one's like pretty huge and like a beefy. Well, not beefy. It's a little bit like blocky. So I don't know if I made it so like the sword's coloring matches with the user. Who knows? Okay. It's a little frustrating watching the recording now, like spending so much time on this, because, like, man, like this, I really cannot make up my mind how I want this to look, and nothing is coming up to me is like how a character model like this would be holding this weapon, and that's part of the that's, believe it or not, like doing like this kind of creative decision probably takes more time than like building like a small section of that sword, because of at least it feels a lot longer, because you had to I'm really just like thinking about how like a weapon like this be held, because in the game, like because in the game like only androids are holding this, like they can hold this with just like one hand. They don't normally have it in one stance, at least like a few of the videos I saw. So it's not a strength problem, but like if a normal human holds this in one hand, it kind of looks awkward. I don't know what I'm doing with the legs. It's they're just crossed over each other. Maybe it's supposed to look like he's in the middle of a swinging something. But I feel like if I had to do that, I should probably have the sword a little bit slanted, so like there's a clear line of motion be made here. As you can tell, I didn't really like this pose either, because I immediately soon after like just reset the whole thing. And there's another problem where I try not to repeat the same pose again, which is a little difficult. Again, like a lot of the requests I get are like just swords and stuff. Like rarely I get like guns, which I'm surprised. Like a really popular request I get are like katanas. And I should probably say this, but like in all honesty, I do not like modeling katanas, Not because like I don't like how they look, not because they're necessarily difficult. It's because I already made like 3 other katanas, and I feel like there's not really any difference between those two. So like whenever someone requests a katana, like I used to try to think of a way to make this one unique, or if I'm just lazy, I just like reuse one of my pre-made katanas and just use that as a base. It's not really all that fun, honestly. I mean, I mean, like the one of the projects I'm still working on, which I doubt I'm ever gonna finish, is this like this one katana, which I try to give it a gimmick where it transforms into something, but I could not, for the love of me, think of what it would transform into. I don't think that model will ever see the light of day because like it just doesn't look interesting as the state it is right now, and it's really difficult to make a katana feel really like distinct looking if you just look at it at a distance. A lot of people suggest to me, "Oh, can you make like Virgil's Yamato like for at least 2 times, like 3 times in the past?" And I already made one, so I just always like give it the model I already made, and it's not really a good looking model in my opinion. And the thing I hate about that model is like a lot of the more characteristic details of the katana is like completely on the handles, and I don't know what it is, the hilt. But those details are so minor and imperceptible that like I don't I really don't want to put this much like effort into details just for something tiny as this. And it doesn't help that like there's already existing like 3D models for the Yamato, which is vastly better. Um, it's a little bit demotivating that like I'm already do something which comes off really redundant. Okay, finally, I posed the thing. I mean, it's not really anything special to me. He's just looking at the blade lovingly. I don't know. I don't know what that says about him. After this, I just take a picture of this guy and a picture of the weapons, export it, and yeah, that's about it. That's the entire process. I hope you learned something from this. This is the first time I've ever done something like this with commentary, and I'm just listening to my voice, and it was ugh. I do not like the sound of my voice. I thought I sounded a lot more deeper than this. I sound like a freaking dweeb. But hey, this is a new experience. I hope you guys learned something about this. If you guys want the models, I leave all the model files in my Discord server. So if you're gonna grab like a lot of this and a lot more, just join that server. I'll tell you where to get it. Just ask me. And whew, man, this this video is so long. I had to cut like a 3-hour video. Anyways, see ya. Thanks.